Okay, so now moving on to section 7 of chapter 2, we're going to talk a little bit more about our macromolecules and how we either break them down or build them up. So, we're talking about when we talk about our macromolecules, we're talking about organic compounds because remember, organic compounds contain carbon. Carbon has some really important properties. One is that it's electroneutral, meaning that it's never going to gain or lose electrons. So it's never going to form an ionic bond. It's always going to be some sort of covalent bond that it forms. Not only can it form covalent bonds, it can form up to 4 covalent bonds, which makes it also very unique. So our major organic compounds, like I mentioned, these are our macromolecules. Our macromolecules are what we consider polymers because they are chains of similar units that we call monomers. So our 4 major macromolecules that we have in our body are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. All of these are organic compounds, meaning that they all contain carbon. So our body is constantly breaking down carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids into their monomers to be used for different things. And we're also taking the monomers and building them back up. So depending on what macromolecule we're talking about is going to determine what type of monomer that's used to make them. So if we're talking about carbohydrates, their monomers are monosaccharides. So those would be the building blocks that make our carbohydrates. If we're talking about proteins, those are made of amino acids. We talked about those in chapter 3 when we looked at the genetic code. There's 20 possible amino acids. Nucleic acids, so those are things like our DNA or our RNA. So the monomers for nucleic acids are nucleotides. And if you remember, we have A, T, or U, G, or C that are individual nucleotides. Lipids, they do not have a true monomer. So no true monomer. And when we talk more about lipids, you'll see why. So it doesn't matter which macromolecule we're talking about, whether it's a carbohydrate or a protein, they are all synthesized via the same type of reaction, and they're all broken down into their monomers by the same general type of reaction. In this example right here, they're just showing you basically the building of a disaccharide. So we have 2 monosaccharides right here, and we're building a disaccharide, so a larger molecule. Anytime we go through and we take those monomers, again, from any of those macromolecules, and we're making something larger or we're trying to link those monomers together, it's always going to be a dehydration reaction. Why is it dehydration? Because we're actually removing water from the 2 monomers, so dehydration. So one of the monomers is going to lose a hydroxyl group, and the other monomer is going to lose a hydrogen group. This collectively is H2O or water. And these 2 things have to be removed from the monomers in order to create the bond to link them together. So now you can see we have a bond right here between those 2 monomers. Again, this is showing you 2 monosaccharides. We could have some sort of amino acid here and an amino acid here. They contain the same general groups on them, and if we were trying to link 2 amino acids together, we would remove a hydroxyl group from one and a hydrogen from the other to leave in order to create the bond between the 2 monomers. So if we're trying to build up a larger molecule or link 2 monomers together, it's a dehydration reaction because we're removing water. The opposite is true if we have a macromolecule, or in this case a disaccharide, and we want to break it down into its monomers. we're going to have to add back water. So it's called a hydrolysis reaction. So hydrolysis, if we're breaking down, and dehydration if we're building up. If we're going this way. Kind of a good way to remember this is if you are ingesting food, which is your carbohydrates and your lipids and your proteins, and you want to break them down through digestion, you want to drink water as you eat food. So hydrolysis to break down, dehydration to build up.